Hey, we are live. Welcome, A-listers. As you may have heard, Bo and Dawn and the kids have taken some time off this week. But leave it to Bo. Of course, he wants you to keep training. So that's why I'm here. And you know, of course, Bo is not stopping his training either. Well, I'm Colleen Hauk, and today I'm going to talk to you about some of the big questions I get asked as Bo's story strategy expert and working with his Warrior Mastermind members. But before we start, Bo wanted me to announce that next week, instead of this live, he's going to be doing another masterclass on the power of story. So Gina's going to be posting that into the comments. Make sure you click on that link and you register for this masterclass. He doesn't do these very often. And Bo's going to be training and answering questions. So you do not want to miss this. And speaking of questions, I'm going to have time at the end of the day today as well to answer some of your questions. So be sure to post those in the comments. Gina's going to collect them. She's going to text them so I don't miss them. And we'll get to those at the end of our time together today. Well, the first time I actually saw Bo was on my laptop screen. It was 2016 and I was working in my corporate career, so I didn't know who Bo Eason was. All I knew was that he was going to be one of the speakers and trainers at an upcoming live event I'd be attending. So I decided to settle into my desk and commit 90 minutes of my life to watch one of his videos. It so better be worth it, right? They introduce Bo, and he simply just walks across the stage, or really just walks across my screen. He doesn't even say a word, but already I'm saying, I don't know who the hell this guy is, what he's going to say, what he's going to offer, but I am in. And those 90 minutes flew by as I watched Bo tell his story and share his story and move across that stage. And the second it was over, I grabbed my entire family into the living room so we could watch it again on the big screen. And just a couple of months later, when I was there at that live event, I saw Bo perform, deliver, and I knew in my gut that if I wanted to be able to share my story and be physical on stage and with my clients, he was the guy I had to work with. So just over a year later, after I went through the Personal Story Power event and I myself went through the Warrior Mastermind program, I became a coach on Bo's team. Bo is the best speaker. And so I'm so honored that he allowed me to take over this live and be with you, the A-listers today, to continue this Leading with Your Story series. So let's dive in. I'm going to first kick it off with the biggest question that I get, which is, can I use my personal story in the business world? Yes. In fact, you must use your personal story in business. As Bo shares, story allows you to immediately build that intimacy, connect you with your audience, build that rapport, all on a personal level. Story builds trust, and trust is the key word. You know, research finds that the number one question somebody asks when they first meet you, they ask themselves, can I trust this person? That's the first thing they want to know. And sharing your personal story immediately allows them to find that trust in you. Now, why I hear this question asked so often is usually one of two reasons, like this fear that people have. One is People believe, well, the best way to get somebody to trust me and to build that rapport is I got to show them all about my education, how smart I am, all of my accolades. And once they know that I'm the best, then I tell them I'm the best by proving out across my resume. Then they're going to trust me and listen to me. That is so not true. It is the complete opposite. Those that get up and tell everybody about how awesome they are, tell everybody about their education and their experience and their awards, they're the ones who crash and burn. If you try to tell people about that, try to give them advice before you've actually built the trust, you're totally setting yourself up for failure. They need to feel connected to you. And telling them about your resume doesn't give them any sort of connection. We are human beings. Human beings want to feel this energy, we're in it together, right? We have this common bond. We are human beings. And so the best way to connect is by showing your level of humanity. And the best way to show humanity is through your personal story. Allowing somebody to see how your vulnerability shows through, to see how you went through challenges, how you overcame obstacles, that you're just like they are. So story allows that humanity to come across, which is really where the connection and the trust come in. So build the trust through your personal story. Now, the second reason, almost on the opposite end of the spectrum of the fear I hear as to why people are hesitant to share their story in the business world is, well, Colleen, if I talk personal, I'm going to seem totally unprofessional. No, I know that if you are a part of Bo's A-lister group, you know that you have to prepare. And if you're preparing, if you are writing and editing and rehearsing and working on your personal story, you will come across as professional. It's those who think, oh, I'm just going to go and say, that I can rattle off my personal story because I know it and I don't need to rehearse. That's so not true. That's where you will seem unprofessional. That's where then they are going to second guess. But you are going to take the time to really prepare. Mary Kincaid, she was on last week and she shared with you, think about basic story structure, beginning, middle, and end. You want to take them on a journey through your story. So when you prepare your story and work on it and you know that structure and you take them on the journey with you, you will seem professional. They'll know that you took time to care about the audience, that you were thoughtful. Versus think about a time when you see somebody or hear someone who's sharing a story and it never goes anywhere. They're just rambling on and they kind of stay in the beginning and kind of stay in the middle and they never get anywhere. That's a story that's all about them. That's a story that doesn't build any of that connection. And sure enough, if you saw somebody share that kind of personal story, it would seem unprofessional. But you're not going to do that. You are going to prepare so that when you do share your personal story, your clients, your future clients, your audience are going to see, hey, this person cares about me. They're professional, they're ready, they're prepared, and now I'm connected. I see their story. So, rehearsal. That's going to take me to the next part, which is the biggest mistake that I see. The biggest mistake that I see when it comes to story is people's relationship with rehearsal. Bo could talk to you for hours about the importance of rehearsal, but I want to share with you the two reasons that I see as I'm coaching and working with our Warrior Mastermind members, or just people in general about story, the two reasons that they don't have a strong relationship with rehearsal. The first reason is some people think, well, it's my personal story. Why do I have to rehearse that? I mean, I lived it. I know it. This is easy. I got this. Well, think about Bo. You've seen Bo, you've heard Bo share a lot of stories. And I recently had the chance to ask Bo about one of his stories in particular. You've probably seen it or heard it. And it's the story where Bo is sharing about being at the kid's birthday party in the backyard, and he and his son Axel are tossing around the white football together. And we call it the "don't let the ball touch the ground" story. And I asked Bo, hey, how long did it take for you to put that story together to where we now see it today? Like, if I saw Bo tell that story right now today, he would tell it so unbelievably well. But if I saw him tell it again tomorrow, it would be at that same caliber. It would flow. It's I hate to use the word perfection, but like, it's amazing. It's the best, right? I asked Bo, how long did it take to get it there? He shared with me that story that's maybe about 10 minutes long. It took him 2 years. Now, that doesn't mean he wasn't sharing the story in those 2 years. It doesn't mean he was like hunkered down, in a private office, writing, editing, and just rehearsing. No, he was definitely sharing it during that time. But it was a 2-year process to really work through that. And that's his own personal story. That's a story that happened to him, yet he still needed to take the time to craft, edit, and rehearse. So again, a big reason I hear people who don't have a relationship to rehearsal is because they think, I don't need to rehearse. But as I said before, if you just get up in front of an audience and just kind of throw this story out there, it's doing a disservice. It's not building the trust and the intimacy and connection. So you do need to rehearse your personal story. So on the flip side of that, the other reason I hear why people don't have a good relationship with rehearsal is because they tell me they don't have enough time. Let's break down this myth. Look, we all have the same 24 hours in a day. I get it. I came from the corporate world. I'm an entrepreneur and business owner, just like many of you. And I have a family at home. I understand what you're saying about that. But I think it's because people have this vision that, oh, okay, if I have to rehearse my story, that means every single day I have to block out an hour or 2 hours to rehearse. Let's just cut that right there. In your beginning stages, as you're putting your personal story together, you're going to write and edit, and you're going to get it to a place where it feels like, okay, this is good. I've got it to a place where I'm feeling like it's time to rehearse. You need to print that story out onto paper and put it somewhere where you are going to see it every day, whether that's on your nightstand, on your bathroom mirror, in your car, wherever it is that is going to trigger you to see it every day. And every day at these beginning stages, just simply read your story out loud off of that piece of paper. And so if you think about it, if your story is only 3 minutes long, that means your rehearsal that day in those beginning stages is only 3 minutes. Just start in these small steps, these small increments to at least commit to saying your story out loud at least once every day. Even if you have a copy of it on your nightstand, so you make sure before you go to bed, you say, I haven't told my story yet today. Let me get that paper out. I'm just going to read it right now. That's how you get started. And then as you start to say, okay, I want to start building some physicality into it, then you're going to start blocking out some bigger chunks of time. And absolutely, as you get closer to the time where you're going to share that story informally, that's a great rehearsal. But formally, if you are doing a virtual class, a webinar, or when we get back to in person, you're going to be in front of people sharing your story. As you get closer to that, then yes, you will want to block off bigger chunks of time more frequently and more consistently as you get there. But don't say you don't have enough time to rehearse. Just start off small, get it flowing. Now, I'm going to give you a little bonus insight here. It also helps to go through rehearsing your story in order to edit it. So most people think, okay, I need to sit at the computer and write my story, and I'm going to do my editing there. And absolutely, some of that happens. But way more of the editing can happen when you actually have your story up on its feet and you are working it, moving it, saying it out loud, and even delivering it to your spouse or your friends or your kids. When you have your story up on its feet, rehearsing it, it actually helps you with the editing process. So, biggest mistake is relationship to rehearsal. So commit to that rehearsal. All right, I'm going to transition into the third piece that I wanted to share with you today. Now, don't forget, I am going to be answering questions, so make sure you type those into the chat. Gina's going to grab those and text them to me. So I was talking to Bo on Friday, and we were chatting about this whole virtual world. How do we build this connection? How do you share story in your virtual world? And I've actually been talking to a lot of my corporate clients about this. So I thought I would share with you, the A-listers today, what I call my 3 C's, or my C's on camera. So the strategies that I've shared of how you go from being in in-person meetings into a virtual meeting. So be ready. The 3 C's. Number 1 is connect. Well, the funny thing is, that's what Bo is training you on all the time. Ways to connect, ways to build trust. It's through your story. Because in person, when you can be in person, you can connect initially by a handshake, by a high five, by a big smile, by maybe noticing something in the office or the location you're with that person in, and make a connection there. Or you've got extra time with them, right? You might be meeting for coffee, have a lunch meeting. It's like you have more opportunities in person to connect. In the virtual world, you're limited to a finite kind of time slot typically. So the best way to connect in a virtual world is what Bo is telling you. You've got to share your personal story. It should be the first things out of your mouth. So in the virtual world, you've got to do your story. It's even more important. And I would also add that we're in a situation in our current time where trust is at an all-time low. There is fear and this lack of trust happening. So it's even more reason why you should be using your personal story as that immediate way to be connecting. The second C is the word competence. So earlier I shared with you that telling your personal story won't make you seem unprofessional if you prepare and rehearse. So the best way to be influencing people and connecting even on that next level in the virtual world is by demonstrating your level of competence. And you can do that by preparing and rehearsing. So make sure before you get into a virtual meeting or a virtual seminar, a virtual presentation, that you have rehearsed in front of the camera. I would also offer, if you're in sales or you're going to be making an offer, do role playing. Go through that with somebody. It's better to mess up and feel awkward with somebody else than when you're live and you have to do it with your client or potential client on the other end. And then show your competence with tech. Do tech run-throughs. And if you don't have a team, you don't have a tech crew to do that with, use friends and family. I'm serious. My very first live webinar I did, I literally had my husband, my son, and my daughter dial into their individual Zoom accounts in different rooms in our house. And that's how I tested my tech for my first live webinar. So you've got to do all of this preparation and rehearsal so that you can show, once you get on to the virtual meeting or virtual presentation, that you've got some level of competence. And then the third and final C that I'll share with you in this virtual world is to captivate. Now, this isn't saying you don't need to captivate during in-person meetings. I mean, that's why I started working with Bo, because he could captivate an audience like nobody I've ever seen. But it's so much harder virtually. In fact, I'll share with you another research data point is that people's ability to pay attention during face-to-face meetings is at about a 94%. Like they're there, they're pretty engaged. In virtual meetings, it drops to 42%. It is so much more difficult to captivate your audience when you are virtual. You're limited to this little box, right? It's a talking head. You don't get to see all of the body language. You don't get to have this energy that comes from being in near proximity to one another. So you have to be even more captivating and hold your audience's attention, because on the other side of the screen for your audience is a whole world of distractions. They maybe have family members or their phone or email, or they're multitasking, trying to watch you in one browser, and they've got email open in another. So you have got to be even more captivating. So just a couple of tips on that I like to share with you is really just thinking about how do you then eliminate distraction on your end of the screen. As much as you can eliminate the distraction behind you, then it helps eliminate their total world of distraction. So those couple of tips. Number one, make sure your background is clean. It's professional or matches your style, your personality, and there's nothing moving. This is like one of my biggest pet peeves. Again, we want to eliminate distraction. We want them focused on you. So nothing should be moving in the background. And I know it's summer right now. It's hot. We love our ceiling fans. But position your camera so that your audience doesn't see a moving ceiling fan in behind you, or moving automobiles, or, as much as possible. And then the second tip I would give you is in regards to light. Have all of or most of the light coming in front of you, and no light or very little light behind you. And I'm sure you've seen this. You've gotten onto a virtual call and all of a sudden there's all this light behind somebody, no light here, and they just look like a big blob. You can't see their facial expressions. We want to see your facial expressions. You want to be able to captivate with what the audience can see. So your lighting in front of you is going to really help that. So I have more to share with you, but I want to get to the Q&A, and I can see in the corner of my eye here, Gina is texting me. So I'm going to get to those. If you do want to stay in touch with me, Gina will put my website in there. And then of course, like I said, I'm a story strategy expert on Bo's team with the Warrior Mastermind members. But let's jump into some questions. All right. By the way, thank you, Gina. So BB asks, do you open with an introduction to yourself, or do you go deep into the thick and juicy parts first? All right. So in an ideal world, if you needed to have some sort of introduction, typically there would be somebody else introducing you. And you may have seen that, for example, last week or the week before when Bo had Dr. Joan Rosenberg or Mary Kincaid on. Bo did the introduction of that person so that when they started speaking, they got to dive into the juicy parts, BB, as you say. Sometimes you may have to do just like a quick little housekeeping. Like today, it's just me. I was solo, so I couldn't just dive into my story. You guys didn't know who I was. I had to talk a little bit about Bo and some housekeeping, but I didn't talk much about myself. I tried to get into a little bit of the story of how Bo and I met. So ideally, the first words out of your mouth when you jump on camera or hit the stage is right into your personal story. And then you can tell them more about yourself later throughout. And oftentimes that comes out just naturally or organically through your training. But if you do, depending on your audience and the circumstances, you may have to do a little introduction. But again, you don't want to be bragging and giving all of your accolades. Just give them that little bit that they need to know so they are like, okay, I get it, who this person is, and then jump into your story. All right. Thank you for that, BB. All right. Next question. Chelsea asks, what do you think the hardest thing is to do or say when you are telling your personal story? Chelsea, so I will share from my own personal experience on this particular question. I find, and I would venture to say pretty much everybody would say, the hardest thing is really showing your vulnerability. And I'll give you, again, my personal example. So the personal story that I share when I'm giving my talks or my trainings is a story about how I did nothing but work for 13 months. I was awful to my family. I hit burnout in my job and thought I would have to quit my job if I wanted to keep my family and stay sane. And when I would first tell that story, I would say, I come home at night and everybody's scared of me because I'm yelling at them. That's how I would tell my story. And I remember both Bo and Mary always reminding us that we don't want to sound like a news reporter. We don't want to sound like we are just retelling from the outside. We want to actually, as the storyteller, be reliving the story in front of the audience's eyes. So instead of saying, oh, well, it's because I come home and yell at my family, when I tell my story, I'm actually yelling at my family. So on camera or on stage, I'm yelling, why didn't anybody pick up those socks on the floor? Why are those dishes still in the sink? I'm yelling at them. And I will tell you that those first times doing that were super embarrassing. I wanted to cringe. I wanted to roll up in a ball. I didn't want to share that side because I sound awful. But I'll tell you, I went from telling my story the first way, where it was a little bit more news reporter in that section, that when I would tell that story, I'd have people come up to me and say, wow, thank you. It was a great story. You're a great speaker. But when I changed it to reliving it and really getting vulnerable and going to a place that I didn't want anybody beyond the walls of my home to hear, when I started yelling at my family on stage, the comments I received after were totally different. It was, oh my gosh, do you have a camera inside of my house? That's crazy. That's what I sound like. And that's where we want to get the audience, that connection. When they saw me be themselves, they were much more connected. They had more trust in me. So I would say that's the hardest part, is reliving those pieces that you just really don't want to share in front of an audience. But it's usually the place that you want to get to so they can connect to it, that they can see themselves in the story. All right, Chelsea. So number 3 question here, Tiffany asks, oh, does doing Facebook Lives count as rehearsing? Yes. Oh, really? I mean, everything's rehearsal. I mean, even, and Bo would say the same thing, even when we've got like a big presentation, everything is still a rehearsal. Now, granted, we want to do as many rehearsals leading up to something really big, right? But Facebook Lives, that's a great way to do rehearsal. There's a lot of forgiveness there. You, especially if you are looking into your actual Facebook account, and you get to see people's names popping up, you're going to feel connected. It's going to feel a little bit more intimate for you as the storyteller and allow you to really connect even more so as well. So Facebook Lives, definitely. Grab friends and family, put together a virtual call, just with some people and say, hey, I'm working on a story. Can I grab a few of you and just tell it? And those are all great ways to rehearse. So love that idea. Thank you so much, Tiffany, for sharing that. Okay, let's see. Next, Carrie. Carrie asks, what suggestions do you have to be more captivating? So, Carrie, I shared a few of those, which were more about tech, right? And it may sound so simple or like not that big of a deal, but I was brought into a multinational global tech company to literally talk about this. How do you look more captivating on virtual? And just like I shared with you, the lighting is important, the background. I see so many people who jump into these virtual meetings and, it's fine. If you have a yoga ball in the background, great. I get to see that you do yoga, but I don't want to see your like sweaty gym socks and your sweaty towel and, just stuff lying all over the place. So make sure that, again, eliminating those distractions behind you, making sure things aren't moving, you've got the right lighting. The other thing I would offer is about the camera angle. So this is another kind of pet peeve with me, especially when a lot of people first got kind of pushed into the virtual world. You didn't have experience. You default to your laptop sitting on your desk with the camera. Well, when you do that, that puts the camera underneath you. And ideally, you want to have the camera at eye level or slightly above. And I had somebody ask me one time, they said, "Oh, is that because you don't want to have a double chin?" I'm like, it has nothing to do with that. It's because when you have your camera underneath you, your audience is looking up your nose. And I don't know about you, but I don't want to be looking up someone's nose, right? Again, that's distracting. We want to eliminate distractions. So have your camera angle placed, so that it's eye level or above. For me right now, even though I have a separate camera, I just have everything propped up on a box that I have in my home. So you don't need to have fancy equipment. And then the final thing I would offer about being captivating is thinking about your energy. So again, it's so much harder. Like, if you've presented on a virtual meeting, it's almost more tiring than if you are in person. You have to be, notice I'm sitting up, I'm leaning a little bit more into you, even though I'm sitting in a really comfy chair where I could be leaning back here. No, I'm sitting up straight. I'm trying to be engaged. I'm looking into the camera lens as often as possible, using some hand and arm gestures, trying to use facial expressions, talking a little bit louder than normal. So, you've got to really push that energy out there to be more captivating. Okay, hope that answers that for you, Carrie. All right, so the next question, I'm not sure who this is from, but it is, do you have tips for not saying the same word over and over when we deliver our stories? For example, saying anyway, so, wow, great question. The tip is rehearse. You have to rehearse it. So once you write your story, take those out. I hear Bo and Mary always say where you have ands and well and so. If you were to go back and look at the written version, you probably don't have any of those. So make sure your written version doesn't have a lot of those transition words that aren't needed. And then rehearse that story. It's getting it to a place where it's memorized up here so that when you do deliver it, you don't add in the ands and the wells and the ums. And you can throw some of that in occasionally if it's, you're trying to be more casual, but the tip is rehearsal. You have to rehearse your story. The more it becomes attached to your DNA, then when you go to deliver it, it's just going to flow out and you won't feel as nervous and trying to add all of those little ums and buts and wells. Okay, I have another question here. Let's see. And I think we're good on time. I think this is from Bobby. Remind the A-listers that the story does not necessarily have to directly relate to what you're presenting, selling, or talking about. Oh, and he says, Bo and you and the rest of the team do a great job teaching us that. Oh, thanks, Bobby. Yeah, so let's talk about that. I will tell you, some of the best personal stories that I get to see through the mastermind program are the stories that actually have nothing to do with people's businesses. I've seen mastermind members share stories about a torn relationship with their mom, but they're a business strategist. Like, that has nothing to do with it. I'm yelling at my family on stage. I'm talking about how awful I was as a wife. And that does have somewhat to do with my business, but the majority of it, it's like you're living inside of my home. I'm not talking to you in my story about all the things I do to help my clients now. I will share that I've seen a manager go in to the first time ever taking over a sales office, and trust was at an all-time low. And instead of getting up there and telling a business story about how great he was at sales, he told a story about how he became a dad at 19 years old. Like, you, on the surface level, you might think, how does that story have anything to do with that person being a manager of a sales office? But again, think about why Bo has shared with you that you're telling story. It's to reveal something about yourself so that they can connect and trust you. And the best way to do that is through those defining moments. Bo trains you on that, to think about the defining moment, the moment in your life that wasn't your best. And it's usually something in your personal life, not necessarily with your business. And I remind our mastermind members all the time about this. Like, think about Bo. Most of Bo's stories are about, getting onto the UC Davis football team. That's the first time I heard Bo. That was the story he shared. Well, I wasn't going to Bo to learn how to get on a college football team, right? That had nothing to do with his business, but his story revealed his character to me. I got to see through that personal story that had nothing to do with his business, exactly the type of person that Bo was, what his ethics were, what his values were. And it allowed me to say, that's the dude I want to work with. So absolutely, it does not have anything to do, doesn't have to do with your business. In fact, I believe that it shouldn't, that if you can, you've got a personal story. And Bo says the more personal it is, the more universal it'll be. Now, if you'd like to share any of your business stories, you can do that throughout the rest of your talk or the rest of your training. But we're talking about opening. How to build that trust from the beginning is opening with your personal story. So, all right, I think we are good. You guys had some great, sorry, actually, Gina texted me. Chad, we've got time for one more. Oh, besides Bo, who are you inspired by and look up to? Oh my goodness. Okay, wasn't expecting that question. Wow. Well, besides my mom and my husband, my immediate family, and Dawn, Bo's wife, who inspires me all of the time. Oh my goodness. Can I follow up with you? Can I add this in the comments after the live? That just completely threw me off track. I'm so in story mode. I have so many people that motivate and inspire me. I'll add something in the comments after this is done and posted. But Chad, that's a great question. So a couple of things. First of all, marching orders. What are you going to do after this live? First of all, and these are my marching orders that I know Bo will support. First, set a date that you are going to commit to, quote unquote, finishing writing your story. So I want you to put a date on the calendar where you say, okay, I'm going to get my story to a place where it feels good, right? Again, it's not necessarily truly finished. It's good. It's good enough for you to then print it so that you have that story with you, because that's your second marching order, is to start rehearsing it. And again, I talked about baby steps. Just commit to reading your story out loud each day, okay? So those are your marching orders. Set the date so that you can get that story printed out and start rehearsing it, reading it out loud, and you'll still continue to edit it after that. So remember, instead of a live next week, Bo is offering that masterclass on the power of story. Gina's, I'm sure, going to post that link again in the comments. Be sure to sign up for that. Like I said, Bo doesn't offer those very often. His training and the questions that he answers in there are always unbelievable. You'll also get to see more detail, more intimacy of how Bo shares his stories, how he moves, how he interacts. And Gina's posting that in the comments below. All right. Thank you so much, A-listers. Again, I've been so honored. Thank you to Bo and the team. You guys get out there, share your personal stories, make that connection, and make a difference in the world. I'm Colleen. See you next time.